Hello. Oh no. Oh no. Was there a technical issue, sir?
We're okay. We're here.
Fucking
We're
Octung.
Achtung.
Octung.
Achtung.
Hey
How's
man,
how's your anime German?
my anime German sucks ass.
I
Which is
gave it a
which,
I gave it a shot.
oh, you did?
I gave it a shot to the best of my ability because I learned a couple of German phrases back when I was a kid, and like the more consonants I see together in a sentence, my eyes just glaze over.
Yeah, German doesn't care.
Yeah.
That's why we moved on to English, which also doesn't care, but we know.
Like as long as if you hear it first and you can say shit like "Die Gedanken sind frei," but
Yeah.
if you do uh, not know the word and you're just reading it together, it takes a lifetime of
hmm
practice to just blaze past all of these syllables and vowels and just like meld them into one shape.
You know, now that we're talking about Germans, I discovered something quite awful yesterday. Um, So when you were a child and you were on a bus and you were looking at a lady or a man on the bus, right? And you were like little child staring at them, right? Your mother would then turn to you and say,
Don't stare.
right. Do you know what country doesn't have that?
Probably
Germany.
okay. A lot probably, but go on.
Germany has no social more against just staring at strangers for as long as you want.
Huh. Okay.
I feel like I would fucking lose my mind if I went to Germany now.
Okay.
That makes me so fucking anxious.
So, just for what it's worth, uh, I get stared at everywhere. It doesn't really, there's no country
Oh, yeah.
filter on that. So, to me,
Would
everywhere
you
is
Let
that.
me ask you, when's the last time you were in Jamaica or like Trinidad and Tobago?
4 years ago.
Were you stared at there?
Not abnormally so.
Okay, so yeah, okay. It's a it's a tall guy thing,
Sure. Yes, it's my height. Absolutely. No.
right?
Yeah. No, if anything, the problem with there was the moment I opened my mouth.
Oh
Yeah.
yeah, and the thick accent from elsewhere comes out.
You're not. What is that? What's going on there? Yeah. But anyway, if Germans don't have the staring thing, etiquette, that's interesting. I don't know what that has to do with um, fucking sad robots, but I'll tell you what, Signalis is okay. It was a pretty good game the last time we talked about it,
And then now it's like one of the best
and
games.
now it's like one of the best. And now it's like fucking incredible, and the
I made
difference
a I
is
made a
literally
tweet on
the
it
yeah
that was
the
like,
ending.
I think this game is like perfect. Like
Yeah, I
it's
I liked
ridiculous.
I liked it a lot, and I thought it was a pretty neat game. And then I beat it, and then it shot it up by like 2 points, you know, or so. Like it went from like this is pretty cool to this is excellent. That's a
Yeah, so
strong narrative close, um,
mhm.
and it does the best thing you could hope for with a story. Which okay, so um, you briefly mentioned this just before we started. Not spoiler cast
I
because
deny the need for a spoiler cast
fair, fair,
personally, which is funny to me because as I looked over into the chat, I saw somebody go, "Oh, Pat's gonna spoil it." Like, no.
fair.
I think it's actually very easy to talk about Signals without spoiling it.
Yeah. And I'd say I think I understand why what you're getting at in that like the nature of its strength is I mean it's a solid game, but like um there's an emotional resonance to like its impact,
Yeah.
and it's easy to talk about that without getting into the specifics of it because you
hmm
just want to compliment the the writer's ability to let you feel those things, and you don't have to get into details to do that.
Yeah, so I went and took a look, and I'm like, this game feels like a passion project. It's like, yeah, no, it's two people. It's two German anime nerds who
Hmm.
wanted to make a survival horror game. and like you could fucking feel it. As in terms of a game, it is an incredibly solid, well thought out, um, a classic, like looking back classic type of game of a older genre, done in the old style, that hits all the notes and is like laughably, and I mean laughably, on the nose
Yeah.
with many of its callbacks.
I'm gonna say
Like
slavishly faithful.
the level structure of that game just turns into a Silent Hill game. And I don't mean like it becomes like a Silent Hill game. I mean the areas are named the same fucking name. And
The save boxes are the same.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, it has the same intro, and it's slavishly, you know, tributing what it loves, and again, it wears it on its sleeve, is what we said, is what I said last week. But I guess so. The one thing that would be, but we won't do it. But like the one thing that would be fun is just the speculative timeline of events. Is
Speculative. Okay.
is pretty. That is a fun thing that I thought was pretty interesting after the ending, you know. But regardless of any of that stuff, I will say that like, yeah, what I like most about, you know, like beating it is you have what I was mentioning is like you have a really good ending that doesn't require you to have completely understood everything that happened beforehand. You can just watch that ending for what it is, and even if so much of what came before flew over your head, it still fucking lands. And
Yeah,
that is a talented thing to do, when you want to have something still be amazing if you understand all of it, but not completely fly over someone's head. And I feel like another example of that is like Snake Eater is a really old example of a game where you can play through most of that and kind of be lost, but you're just kind of going from boss to boss doing Metal Gear things. But the last thing you do, and then the reasons why the boss, why Big Boss is upset, immediately follow that final boss fight, and then your shitty fucking White House meeting, and like you can go, oh, I understand that, and that sucks, and now I get that moment, you know. So there's a really rare but cool thing to like making sure that, yeah, even if you were lost, this is still gonna hit, and it hits really hard.
I'm gonna go off. I'm gonna describe. Okay, so I think one of the easiest ways that we can talk about this game in terms of not spoiling it is that the trailer for it is actually very excellent.
I haven't seen it.
I don't know if you remember the old trailer, but it shows like the arm popping off and a lot of the visual motif elements and the octung and all that weird shit. So it's like, okay, you have a survival horror game that takes place with a robot, an android robot, in a weird anime Germany space future. And there's a lot of perspective fucking with. There's first person segments. There is a lack of continuity of space. There's a lack of continuity of time. There's a lot of dream imagery. So it's very like episodes 25 and 26 of fucking Evangelion at points. So there's a lot. Like I was talking to Susie, and I believe she's like going through the process of just translating all the fucking German on all those flashcards that shows up. Because when I was streaming the end of it, I'm like, wow, there's a lot here. We have to wait until some YouTuber fixes this for us. And she just is in the chat and just goes, yeah, I'm on it.
Yeah, it doesn't
I'm gonna
pretend.
do it.
Yeah, it doesn't pretend to not be cerebral from the moment you start it.
However, despite all that, and despite the fact that I'm not personally familiar with the fucking 12th century like impressionistic paintings
Or the Yellow
from
King.
Sweden, that they're fucking. No, I'm familiar with the King in Yellow.
Okay.
But I'm not familiar with the paintings that they continually call back to are real paintings that are about death or something. I have no familiarity with those at all, despite the fact that I don't know that, and that some people might not be familiar with the King in Yellow, and some people don't fucking speak German. Like I don't speak German. Do you?
Nope.
Some people may not have seen End of Evangelion, etc. Boy, if Silent Hill and Resident Evil and Ghost in the Shell are obvious elements, oh man, you get to that 60-70% mark, and wow, you hope you fucking watch End of Evangelion if you want to get all this shit.
Also, if you played Nier Automata, you might enjoy something once or
Yeah.
twice. That in being the entire, the literal, like gestalts and replicants like are not even a
Yeah.
hair breadth away from what they originally were.
But even if all that just is like, ooh, zany imagery, the actual core of the timeline of events that really matters, as long as you read and pay attention, is actually fairly clear and very easy to understand. It's drip fed to you, and like the specific timeline and the specifics of what really happened.
Yeah, that's what I was gonna say.
Because there's parts there are parts of that game that are shown to you as if they were objective, but they may not be objective.
Yes.
Right.
So that's exactly it, right?
But the emotional timeline is actually extraordinarily clear, and that's what the ending deals with.
And it also echoes itself, like it follows. So Cloud Atlas, the movie, the book is told in mandala chronological order. So it starts in the past and it goes to the future and then moves back out to the past, right? So it goes all the way to a point and then it reverses itself. For the film, they decided that instead they would edit it to be an emotionally chronological. Yeah. So as characters feel a similar thing, you cut over to someone else who's feeling something similar in that moment, right?
Yeah.
And
so when Tom Hanks is finding out about the True in space, you also go to the space future and find out about Tom Hanks finding out that fucking Halle Berry is in fucking drag yellowface.
Yes, correct. Exactly. So, but I bring it up to mention that there's an idea here between, like, you get flashes of things, and early on in the game, the moment you start it, there's all kinds of flashes of things happening. What's actually real? What's actually in Shinji's head? What's actually something else entirely of a different time? This is all up to speculation, and
there's a lot of identity and perspective trickery in this game. It's extremely successful at confusion, and then extremely successful at giving you just enough detail that even if, like, you and I sat down right now, I bet we could piece together a rough sequence of events that was mostly correct.
I have one in my head that may or may not be correct. It kind of, like, I feel like I have a beginning and a middle, and then the end is where it's like that could be or could not be what happened.
Yeah, know? And the issues then is like because you're dealing with some Eldritch King in Yellow shit, whether or not events are occurring as they are is up for debate in general.
Yes.
So that would also mess with the timeline of events.
Now, whether or not the timeline is hypothetical, whether it's real, or whether it's something other, which there's space for other, especially considering there's multiple endings here.
Have you seen all the endings?
I've seen all the endings, exactly.
Okay. Yeah. 3 of them are perfect emotional capstones, and they're actually much better than the Silent Hill 2 endings that use the same kind of format. Silent Hill 2 had we're going to monitor your gameplay and decide what you're going to do. And some of them are certain playthroughs of Silent Hill 2 can end with endings that don't feel appropriate to what you actually did. The leave ending in Silent Hill 2 is the most problematic because if you're the kind of person, sorry, not leave, water ending. So if you're the kind of person who, like, I want to really check everything, I want to understand everything, I want to scope everything out, I want to make sure, it's treating you as in you're indecisive instead of somebody who wants to investigate everything. Like if you look at the knife 10 times, stuff like that. And that can end in a thing of like, oh man, I'm doing it, I'm learning everything, I'm trying to figure it out, and James, okay, what the fuck? What?
I don't like the idea that trying to be smart about your health items is punishing, I don't like that in any game, because once you look at health and how it works, you can either play the game in a panicked way where you're like, I'm hurt, I should be healthy, or you can be like, I know how much this heals, I'm going to try to make the best of those choices. But I think making optimized choices is not necessarily an emotional decision, but that getting factored in from Silent Hill, of course, makes me go, I
Let me
don't
ask you a
think that
question.
feels like what you think it feels like.
So in Signalis, you have 3 endings, and I very that you're going to get on the first time through. The 4th ending is barely worth talking about. It's almost an Easter egg, and it requires spectrographic analysis. It is not for human beings. It is absolutely. It was meant probably to have been discovered 10 years from now, kind of thing. But your 3 emotional context endings, they're all playing off of your conditions for gameplay, right? And what's really fascinating is that the condition. Have you looked up these conditions for how to get them?
I did.
The conditions for gameplay are the inverse of what I expected them to be. The ending that people are trying to get, or the quote unquote good ending, which I disagree with. I think they're all great, actually. Asks you to fucking kill everything and go buck wild and spend tons of time and use tons of health items and just fucking like don't survival horror this game. If you want this, just go hard on it and fucking make mistakes.
Now, my understanding is like your first run through, you did like sub 7 hours or so.
I want to say sub 8.
Okay. And that is with reading everything and like going over all the notes and documents and stuff.
Yeah.
Okay. Because I felt like I just go slower through things, you know.
I'm gonna type it in the chat too.
Yeah, because there's a time. One of the endings, of course. Yeah, there's a there's a time frame based requirement. And I'll let you know.
Yeah, we know.
Yeah.
Okay, you got. Okay, good.
Yeah.
So the ending that you got is the one that people tend to want, or they're going to view as the good ending, and that one requires you to take your time.
I took my time,
which is a really strange condition. The
Yeah.
ending that I got is the one that speedrunners get, because it's about keeping your if you parcel out your ammunition and you go as fast as possible, you get the one that I get. And those are usually, in terms of good, bad, or plus minus, those are inverted. Like the ending that the people who are really into the story are going to want to get to is the one that requires them to spend lots and lots of time in the game and die over and over.
So here's what's interesting, though. I didn't die once.
Oh, I guess it just helps.
Right. So yeah, I went through it at my own, at a slower pace, just going through everything, and I fought whatever I could. I avoided things when I couldn't, but for the most part, and I took damage, but I definitely did not. I didn't die at any point, so it's kind of interesting. And I also spoke to as many people as possible.
There is supposedly a complex
series of calculations
systems.
Yeah.
And the most important thing is that you start with I'm just gonna say the 3 endings we're gonna call left, middle, and right. You got the right ending, I got the middle ending. Neither of us got the one on the left. The bias for ending starts in the middle, and there's 2 points towards that, and you have to overcome that bias with your playthrough to push it to the left or right.
It is an interesting choice in how they put these
so like time
down.
increases that bias, death increases that bias.
Now, besides that, in terms of the the feeling that these endings leave you with, one thing is consistent: sad. Just
robot.
Yeah, sad. Very, very, very sad. And it's interesting in that, like, when you make your Silent Hill comparisons, right, you can look at like you can look at the story of James, especially in 2, as one that's like the moment you start the game, it's already been told, right? And you're walking through the ramifications of that, um, due to, like, you know, his own conflicted feelings, and him
Hmm.
you know, confronting all of that. And that's what the journey is. The journey is that things already went down, you're going
Yeah.
through this. And it's interesting because in this case, like, the journey into the mind is also replicated by technology.
Yeah.
So, like, there is a, like, the metaphor is also physically real, you
Hmm.
know, and that's another thing to
I
play
think
with in
I think the what you just said is a fantastic description of the issue with Signalis's view on reality, is that the metaphor is physically real.
Mm.
Whether or not, like, there's a lot of parts of the game that I look at as like, is that a metaphor? And like the game's like, no, it's real, but it's also a metaphor. It was it was made real.
It means something, but it's happening. Yeah. So yeah, you kind of just, anyway, so you can again, you can read the notes, and you can, so here's what I was kind of doing, right? I'm playing the game in such a way where I'm like, okay, I'm reading notes about these different types of units and about the world, and I'm trying to draw connections between, like, for example, a planet we get introduced to, its name, its symbol, and what's happening on that planet, right? Or a type of robot, what its name is, what it's about, what its strengths and weaknesses are, and then
And
I'm
more importantly, what not to tell it or
right.
do around it.
Exactly, and I'm trying to keep those in mind so that, like, as we meet and encounter people, we can, you know, get a better understanding of what's up,
Mm.
you know,
I think
and
that detail is a really good example of Forest and the Treesing it with the plot details versus the emotional context,
mhm.
right? Reading through those documentations about all these robots' likes and dislikes for these particular model cases, right? There's a lot of information there.
Mhm.
There's a ton. I don't think it's feasible for somebody through their first time through to remember all, I don't know, what, fucking 12, 13 models, likes and
A whole
dislikes and
bunch, yeah.
it's impossible. But keeping that as a general thing of, like, you've been reading documentation about all of these things, likes and dislikes, and how to treat them and why to treat them this way, even knowing that generalized idea sets up a later revelation so that the details aren't actually so important. It's the fact that you've been reading this documentation in the first place and
Yeah.
why this documentation needs to exist.
Yeah, and it actually comes into play when you're trying to, again, when you're theory crafting, like, how that ending, how it could be. Let's say you went with the most literal version of events, you're gonna
Mhm.
be like,
Okay.
if you went with the most literal version of events, like reading about the profiles of these robots, their likes and dislikes and such, will help explain, possibly, like, a good deal of how this went down in a super
Yeah.
literal way if you choose to interpret it that way. The easiest
Yeah.
way to interpret it is just Shinji's head, you know, in which case you don't have
It's a
to
robot.
do a lot of work. Yeah.
Robots is weird.
Yeah. So,
So yeah, I think the game's
and
biggest.
just an
Oh, sorry.
aside, because we're going live here. We
Yeah.
also are broadcasting at the same time that Guilty Gear's new character reveal is
Sin is
happening.
in.
So yes, we'll talk about that, like,
Sin is in, my
in a
boy.
bit. Yeah, there we go. All right, great.
I think the game's greatest strength is, I think it's like the third or fourth time you said it, is like, despite it has some highfalutin ideas, but its emotional context is actually incredibly clear.
Hmm.
I have played too many horror games that I get to the end and I'm just like, what the fuck was that? What
Hmm.
happened?
Yeah, so I haven't played a lot of bad horror games, right? So I haven't seen people miss the mark on these Silent Hill moments that I've been experiencing. And I can only imagine how poor it is when something must go down where you think like where the person making the game thinks, and now this is gonna be the letter to James, and
So
it's a wet ass fart of a
so
moment.
there's two versions of that, right? There's oh man, this is gonna hit so hard. Oh man, it's all gonna, and you're left just like logistically confused, but not emotionally satisfied. You're just like, what? But then, so I'm gonna use Silent Hill Homecoming as a absolute piece of fucking shit here, as a good example here. At the end of Silent Hill Homecoming, you find out you never went to the war at all. You're actually faking it because you were sad about your brother.
So then, how did you know how to
And
use those weapons?
but then the whole fucking game just falls apart because but you've been acting like a military man and you've been being attacked by military representations of your psyche. What the fuck what does that fucking mean? It doesn't make any fucking sense. Also, the emotional through line on that just doesn't hit. It just
Okay.
doesn't hit. What's worse than that? And I mean like way, way worse than that is Silent Hill Downpour, which has the opposite problem. And that problem is you're like an hour in and the character's like, oh, I have a past. And you're like, no, yeah, I get it. Yeah, you killed somebody and you feel bad. Yeah, I get it. No, I get it.
Okay.
I get it. And then like
So-
every single thing that they do is like, oh, murder is bad. Do this puzzle about murder. And you're like, no, fuck.
Yeah.
That's way worse.
Yeah.
That's so much worse.
So, all this to say that when Signalis gets its letter to James moment,
Yeah.
it is phenomenal. It
Yep.
lands. In spite of seeing examples of this in the past and of all kinds, it fucking works. And interestingly, whereas the letter is memorable because of how incredibly voice acted it is, in this case, as dry as you can read it,
Oh yeah.
the moment I'm talking about, as dry as that can be, is the best way to do all the damage in the world to you. So, yeah, I really just I got to applaud Signalis because it pulls it all together in a way where, yeah, even if you were just paying attention for the last half hour before you hit the credits, you're gonna get something out of that. And if you've been paying attention the whole way, it's phenomenal. So, beyond that as well, I can say that I also appreciate that, like, as things came to an end, it was not, it was clear to you every step of the way that you were walking towards a conclusion, right?
Yeah.
I really appreciate that.
So I want to talk about the final level, and I'm not going to talk about where the final level is. So that's fine, right?
And this is coming off the hot off the heels of Mass Effect 2's ending, mind you. So
Yeah.
you know.
Yeah,
So go on. Though.
So Signalis does something really excellently that most survival horror games don't do. Most survival horror games' final levels are visually cool. They're fascinating from maybe a story perspective, but from a game perspective, they're fucking terrible. They're usually the point where you have to nut up and find out whether or not you saved enough ammunition for this point in the game.
Right.
So Silent Hill 3 is probably the best example of that, is that place is just fucking filled with enemies, and goddamn forbid you didn't bring enough guns.
Yep.
But that game has melee weapons that work, so that's their little out. Or you get a Resident Evil situation in which like even the average player will come in.
I mean,
and
I'll like the katana final boss solution that I had to run in Silent Hill 3 is not ideal, but it does exist.
But the melee weapons in Silent Hill keep you from getting soft locked.
Sure.
And Resident Evil, even an average player gets to the end of the lab sections and they're fucking shooting galleries. Like there's nothing that can touch you. It's not actually scary anymore. You're now playing like the ending of like a fucking James Cameron movie.
Sure.
So it's tough. I think Signalis does a great job with the way ammo. I think the way ammo is distributed around the game, there's way more of it than I expected. and I think that the inventory really actually goes a long way to helping that, because actually running dry is kind of a non-issue, right? Like actually running completely out of ammunition is not a realistic threat. But running out of ammunition that you have on your person right now is always a
Yes,
problem,
yes, yes,
no
yes,
matter
yeah.
how far in the game you actually are. Be,
I
you
was
can't
able,
carry enough of it on you.
yeah, I was able to I learned to trust in the unknown to deliver me some kind of ammo and some kind of healing, even if it was not the kind that I could use right then and there.
Yeah. And the final area is large, well designed. It feels like a Resident Evil 1 or 2 mansion. Good puzzles. It's nice and wide, but it
Got
is
a
also
hub.
just filled with fucking enemies. Like
Hmm.
I got to the that final level and I was like, "Oh, this is the part of the game where they said avoiding enemies is no longer a fucking viable option. You will pull your fucking gun out and you will shoot them."
So here's my question to you, though, right? In my run, playing through it, I'm doing what I can. I'm being smart. I have my ammo,
Yeah.
and I'm using it at threats that I have to deal with. And I'm thinking about my ammo in terms of, like I said, 3 bullets is a downed monster, right?
Yeah.
And I'm gonna make it through this room with 2 that are in my way.
Mhm.
Then something changes. And I don't know about you, but for me, in the moment in the game, in the third act, when something has changed,
Mhm.
that narrative moment made me more aggressive
Yeah.
because of what was happening. It
Yeah.
was like, oh, let's fucking go now. I'm taking my guns out. You know what? I'm going to put that extra slot towards my ammo and I'm going to shoot at everything. And the game is rising to meet the occasion while
Yeah, no.
filling you with that motivation.
There's a like
Go time
literal
feels like go time.
there is a literal visual indicator of it is go time now.
Go time. Yeah.
And um
And you're like,
and then it does rise to meet you. It's a real so yeah, games don't tend to end well. Survival horror games tend to have the final level be the weakest, often because they're the smallest or they're the least complex. This is easily the most complex level in Signalis, and it's the most visually interesting one, and it's the best one, and that's what it ends with.
and that's the one where I actually, so for a perfect example is I ignored I ignored my body burning mechanic for the entire game up until that point. That
Mhm.
was the moment I started using it and like actively planning my routes and going, okay, you
So
know what? This room has 2 grunts and a big boy. Fuck that big boy. I'm not dealing with him ever again.
in the third level, I started to go, okay, I'm done with this. I have a save point room. It seems central. I'm going to kill everything outside this room and burn it. And
Hmm.
then when I got to the last level, I was like, hey, I have a save point room and it seems central. I'm going to kill everything outside this room and burn it. And I was wildly rewarded
Yeah.
with that decision, because both of those rooms, that the hallway outside the third and fourth hubs, are like the single most trafficked fucking hallways in the entire game.
Treacherous. However, I did find a way to simply walk around the normal enemies that were just outside that final save room.
Yeah.
You know,
Enemies have a really wide like aura of ability to hit you if you try and juke them.
but you can also walk behind them almost like in lockstep, and they won't care.
Yeah, they have cool awareness.
I guess as long as you're not making a ton of noise and your flashlight's not on, you can get away with some really risky moves.
You know what's one of the things that I laughed when somebody just comes into the stream when I was doing it and watched it and said, "What is up with this Rob Liefeld shit?" And it took me a second. It's like, yeah, no, part of the Signalis art style is that they did not want to model feet. They just no feet.
Just numb it
Every single
down.
character's in the fucking game has their legs fucking narrow to a point.
The Jehuti aesthetic.
Yeah.
Um, so I guess Yeah, the only other bit I'll say is like I had a confusing moment in the ending where I was trying to my assumptions of what the passage of time was were incorrect.
Hmm.
And
Yeah, no, it's easy to make that mistake. I think I made it as well.
did you? Okay, yeah, and I kind of got hit with an initial ooh, and then oh, and then oh, yeah, okay, no, still bad, but
Hmm.
ooh, like, um, and I guess it's up to interpretation, but you get one point of cross reference is one note that kind of talks about like a cycle,
Yeah.
and like what that might mean. But I had a bit of a confusing moment where I was like, oh yeah, wait, how long is a cycle? And then like trying to do some quick maths, you know.
Yeah, but there were 2 points in that game where I pulled out a calculator, and I want to know what the timeline I'm actually looking at, because
Yeah,
they're
yeah,
asking
yeah.
they're recording things in days
Yeah.
exclusively, and
Mm-hmm.
like, okay, well, what the fuck is that in years?
Yeah.
I come on.
And then the other thing is, it's interesting too. Like, do other survival horror games have clues that you don't use often?
What do you
Like,
mean exactly?
so there are times when you'll get a puzzle solution that has like other solutions on it. So two that come to mind, for example, are early on in the game you get a page called frequencies, and there's a
Hmm.
bunch of different frequencies for different like symbols for the
Oh, for
wall
the radio lock
safes.
system. Yeah.
Exactly, but you only end up using like maybe one or two of them, right?
Yeah, no, that happens.
Okay, and then the other
You're
one,
to you're to you're to dig out the vital details.
right? And that note, because I didn't use the rest of them, stayed in the back of my mind the entire playthrough, right?
Well, it's time for you to use that note to think about spectrographic analysis.
Perhaps.
I believe that is actually what that is for, because the game
uh,
makes a massive detail about the radio lock system and all that shit.
yeah, yeah, and some of the absurd like ending requirements involve radio bullshit in wonky places. Um,
Too much, man. It's too,
the
like, way too much.
the other puzzle is there's one in there's a final area puzzle that provides you with like again some notes on what kind of frequencies to play, and there's one that solves the puzzle, and then there's others that don't, or at least one other that doesn't. And I was like, oh, I'm sure I'll have to use this somewhere. And then
Mhm.
it's like, maybe not, So,
Yeah, maybe
uh,
not.
so I definitely am also like getting hit with what you call the mental stack,
Yeah.
where I'm like, when the thing of the beautiful move, whatever the first game was, maybe going back to fucking Rogue or something, where the moment you use the puzzle item or the key on the lock and the key disappears from your inventory,
Yeah.
or the puzzle item is gone, you don't need that acetone anymore. You got your card, right?
Dude, like, it's funny that you mentioned this. Resident Evil 2 Remake has one design problem. One. And it is the fact that when you use a key and it is completely finished, it darkens and puts a little check mark on it,
Hmm.
but it does not ask you, hey, you are done with this key. Do you want to throw it away? Like it does
Discard.
in the original.
Yeah, it absolutely should. Don't just simplify the design for the player in that case. There's no benefit there. Yeah. So anyway, there's all that. And we've already said what we had to say about the 6 slots, about the combat, about the homages and the faithfulness. So in this case, it's just an absolute delivery on those endings,
It
which
is survival horror's Hollow Knight.
ooh, okay,
The
in
way that I
quality.
in terms of, like, man, oh, there aren't that many Metroid or Metroidvania games. And then Hollow Knight comes out, and you're like, oh wow. It reminds me of the way that you described Cave Story to me.
Okay.
The way you described Cave Story to me originally was someone just came out and pretended that they had made a Super Nintendo game, and it was just instantly right up there as if it had come out in that era and would be one of the best ever.
Yeah,
That's how I feel about Hollow Knight, and that is absolutely how I feel about Signalis. If Signalis had come out, okay, let's be honest, it could not have possibly come out for the PlayStation 1.
or
Like
two. Yeah, yeah.
it's
Not.
going for a
Yeah,
PlayStation 1 aesthetic, but then you get to the cutscenes with the fucking ship, and you're
yeah,
like, come on, there's no fucking way. But it could have been a PS2 game.
yeah. No. Cave Story. I remember saying, yeah, that game was released direct to your childhood in the past.
Yeah.
Is how it was put out. Hollow Knight. I also associate with giving you an abundance of game. You know, in this case, I don't think you're getting an abundance of game, but you're getting the shortest, tightest experience. And so for me, it's interesting. You make that analogy. I called it something else. I said that Signalis is like the Sifu of survival horror.
Okay. Okay. Yeah.
It's
I
the
get it. I get
short, tight, really clean experience, and it's out.
So I want to point out that you and I agree with you. Hollow Knight, one of the parts of it is that like, wow, more Hollow Knight, right? So to me, the way that I interpreted that back when I was playing it was like, wow, this thing really understands the Metroidvania, particularly the Castlevania part of it, because Castlevania, particularly Symphony of the Night, its big punch was like, did you think you beat Symphony of the Night? Guess what, idiot? Here comes the inverted castle, right? And so that is like appropriate for that genre, whereas I feel like Signalis is that it is it is the first of the gameplay decided narratives of any survival horror game that I've played that felt perfectly consistent with the way you actually played the game. It actually is better than Silent Hill 2, and it's definitely better than Silent Hill 4 in terms of the consistency of your personal action to the game's conclusion.
Yeah, we referred already to, like, you know, your third act fake out a little bit, and the idea of there being a moment that could be compared to Nier Automata in terms of getting your multiple endings, and it's like this. I was kind of wondering. I'm like, this could go for a while as an actual new game plus, or it can just go strictly to the narrative. And my preference was that it stick to the narrative, and it did. You know, I think it would have been weakened by like making it a full experience with updated, you know, information and knowledge, but you're going through that whole thing again. Yeah, it would not. It would have definitely had to filler, and I don't feel like this game had filler at the end of the day. You know,
No filler in this game.
yeah,
Like genuinely.
So that's it.
Just thumbs up all the way.
Yeah. So this is the non-spoiler cast, because really, fucking, it's worth your money. It's worth supporting.
It's especially worth your money. Like it's $20.
Yeah. This is a hard must buy for this year for sure.
I feel really bad because it came out just at the wrong time of the year. That I know the Game Awards are a fucking sham and they're fucking nonsense, but it deserved to be nominated, so it could have been on TV. So people on to watch TV could have seen the word Signalis.
Yeah, just to go, ooh, what is this thing? And then see the visuals and go, oh, cool, retro, you know? Now, what also makes me kind of sad knowing this, and obviously we talked about, like, the 13 Sentinels issue, but, like, it's a great game that's going to just, you know, be a sleeper hit. This is one of those games, too, where it's almost like, you know how 90% of games don't have a completion achievement for players because most players don't make it to that point.
Yeah, that's right.
Like, if you could just make something in this one that says, man, stick with it. Just write it out. I know you might want to switch back, but stick with it. Fucking write it out to the end, you know, because it pays off so good.